All right.
Yeah.
Somebody hasn't decided.
Everyone does what we do, so.
Mike and Zoe, you might want to come more over here because here's like when you present, the camera is pointing this way.
Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah. Just give folks a couple of minutes. We usually have stragglers.
Exhausting. Oh yeah.
I'm okay.
Similar. Your half-term predictions.
Yeah, half term means slightly fewer people.
I like your system for
Yeah, this is your mark.
posted for each
Oh
one.
my God.
Yeah, otherwise you'll chop the top of your head off on the video.
Wait, doesn't that went for height?
It does, so you might need to be
Just stand next to you, just
Okay, should we kick off? Because I think it will be a bit quieter this week because we've got lots of folks on half term. So hello. I think most of you have been to one of these before, so we won't dwell too long on the intro bits. This is Show and Tell 8, so we're 16 weeks in, and we're just a couple of sprints away from the end. So this Show and Tell, chance to kind of see what we've been working on, ask questions, point stuff out to us, help us know how we can get a little bit better at things. We are running an agile and iterative project. So what this means, and you'll see some of this in today's quick presentation, is there's lots of testing with real users. It's been a feature of every sprint, and it will continue to be a feature of the work as we keep going forwards. We're putting things in front of people. So this could be new digital products. It could be the content we're writing to publish onto the web. Kind of anything and everything. We make sure that actual people have it in their hands and give us real feedback on it, and that helps us make decisions about what the right thing to do is. And I think as colleagues will share some stuff today, always learn something, often quite surprising from when people kind of interact with things. This is what we're doing. It's mostly building a website, but behind that is the technology that runs on, the way that we kind of design both the words we publish, but also things like the buttons that people click on and the layout of pages. All of that stuff needs to be really carefully thought about, and the way that we govern the kind of creation of stuff that we publish to this website as well. So we've put a lot of thought in, and Zoe and colleagues will kind of share what that's been like for a service that we've worked with, but a lot of thought into the steps we take from going from understanding the needs around the service to actually getting something published on a page in real life on a website, and making sure that we have a process that's thorough and repeatable, but also ideally as quick as possible, which I think we've got some learning around. So last 2 weeks, colleagues are going to talk in detail about this, so I'm going to skip off in a minute. We have been doing more work with the library service, getting some of the content done, getting some stuff tested with users, and again, helping us, and so thank you to the colleagues in the service, helping us figure out our process for the future as well. The jobs website, we've got some folks are not here today because they are kind of shut in a room getting on with writing some software to get certain bits of the jobs website finished off, but making really good progress around search, jobs categories, and stepping now into getting the application stuff sorted out as well, so that people can actually apply online too. We're starting lots and lots and lots of work. So there's a ton of stuff that's happening kind of around the edges of the project and not specific to this thing we're building, around rebranding other websites. There are lots of them. So each of us had a main corporate website. So that's the kind of 5 big websites. But then we also have, microsites, subdomains, individual kind of products and services that live on their own little bit of the internet, run by different companies quite often, all of whom handle their kind of branding and styling in slightly different ways. So there's just stacks of stuff going on, kind of figuring out how we get everything changed at broadly the same time so that our entire web estate looks a little bit more consistent on day one. I'm sure it won't be perfect, but from what I've seen so far, we're going to be pretty close to getting a fairly consistent kind of set of experiences across everything we own, which is a no mean feat. We've been doing some work, contacts and complaints. So again, there's kind of 2 things in there. So one bit is figuring out the processes around that, but the other bit is sorting out the technology. So we have a bit of software that the teams doing contacts and complaints will be working with. Our job at the web team is to try and figure out how we kind of integrate with that and build forms that interact with that comments and complaints system. And then loads of ongoing work around homepage and navigation. So in all the testing we do, we learn something about how people navigate around the website. And that helps us think about whether we've got categories in the right place, whether we've got services grouped in sensible ways together, whether there are other ways that we might kind of order and organise some of that information. So, libraries. Who's kicking off?
Oh, well.
I will give tech support on changing browsing, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so for the last couple of weeks, we've been working mainly on the library's content. What we did first was we defined what was going to be our minimum viable product, and what we had to go live with to make sure people could still use the library service as it is. We also restructured the navigation. We looked at how people use things, what they need. We made an assumption on where we think we should group things together, and we put that together. And then what we did is we held user testing sessions, and we basically gave them the thing that we built, and we said, does this work? Can you get from A to B to C and back to A again? And from that, we can then iterate, make changes where we see things failing. We also began peer reviewing, which is a process of someone writing a page of content, someone else then having a look through that content. Does it make sense? Does it make sense to them? So, okay, so this is the new, oh, there you go, my glamorous assistant.
Try and keep his head out.
So this is a start of how we think the library section could look. It's a very, very minimum version of it at the moment. It's basically just the things that we think are needed rather than every single thing that's currently on the BCC website. We've grouped things down here, for example. So these are things, library membership section. These are things that we think people don't need to do all the time. They don't need to be prominent. They don't need to be the things that people always get back to, but they're things that might do once. So we've tried to put those things together. Another thing we did was we tried to prioritise borrowing an item. So one thing we did there was we put everything together in one place. What we found in user testing and what we thought was going to be the problem is that people don't associate borrowing with digital products, so they don't think about online resources or ebooks as borrowing an item, more just that's something I want to read. So actually it was missed in user testing, something that people couldn't find. So that's something where we now know it fails, we can iterate on that, we can make changes, we can bring those bits out into their own sections, and we can look at things like that. And that's it really. The main thing here is we've tried to keep it really simple. We know from comments that we've had that the current website structure is there's a lot of menus and there's a lot of sub-menus and there's a lot of pages on those menus. So what we've tried to do is reduce all of that just to the main tasks. And and we'll go away and we'll make changes and hopefully we'll get there. Oh, and now we'll start back to the slides. Okay, Boris is going to talk about the card sorting now, which is a bit of user testing we did.
Yeah, so as Ben mentioned earlier, we are trying to do user testing of all the things we're working on. So in this particular sprint this week, actually, we did some testing with libraries users. So we did two things. We went first on Monday, we went to the library here and just talked to a few people in really short sessions, which is where this picture is from. So we did what we call card sorting. And then afterwards, on Wednesday, we did some longer interviews, again with some libraries users that applied so that there's this form on the BuckCC website where you can apply for user testing. So we contacted some of those users and tried to do testing with them. So card sorting, what is this about? You saw the new pages, right? You saw the new content. So what this is about is making sure that all that content is structured in a way that makes sense to users. So we used a particular app that's meant for that, that helps, basically lists all the individual pages of content on one side and then asks users to kind of put them in groups in a way that makes sense to them. So by doing that with a number of users, we're going to be able to try to better structure the content, which we're probably going to follow up on in the next sprint. Also helped us identify some things that are less clear, right? So some titles, for example, of pages that don't make all that much sense to people. So one person, for example, right, that's just an example of the feedback we get, once said, what is an online resource, reference resource, right? So things like that that might be very obvious to people that work within the service are not always very clear to users. So it's just important to keep a note of that and maybe try to rephrase it if we can find a better way to do it. Even more important than that, we did try to test the pages that you just saw with users to try and complete tasks. I think one of the things that's quite important is we're trying to always test an end-to-end journey. So we said maybe someone wants to find and reserve a book. So how do you do that from where you start your journey? So we tried starting with the home page and then all the way to getting onto Spiders and actually doing the task there. So we also tried testing with mobile devices, which is quite important. We haven't done a lot of that yet, so I think this pointed out a couple of different issues we might need to address. But most importantly, we did talk about trying the libraries content with real users, which again showed us some of the barriers potentially. Stuart already mentioned that borrowing is not always a good word when you're trying to point people to digital resources, for example. Another thing is also quite often you want to have contact details within the context of where people are trying to find them, right? So one user said that it'd be nice to have the contact details as a link on the replace a library card page, because that's when they got stuck in the process and they would want to contact the library to do that. There's a lot more coming from that research, but this is just a high-level overview of some of the things we talked about and found out. And while we were doing all of that, we were also working with the service. So Zoe is going to present the perspective of a service manager on the whole process and how it was like.
Well, there's a lot of us at the front. We started this process initially. We were really nervous to be first, but also really excited. And we sat down and had a nice chat about user journeys. So what our users and what our customers expect from us and how they would get from one place to the other place. And that was really interesting in itself, as it sort of highlighted just how much we do in our service and how complicated it could actually be as well. And then we went on, and so then we moved on from there based on a little bit of content based on those journeys, and then moved on to user testing, which was really interesting. I did sit and watch a couple of them yesterday, and it's really interesting to watch people, how you think they're going to react and how you think they're going to do something, and they do it in a completely different way. And then so that's really interesting for us to take back as well as a service, to look at Spiders and how that is ordered and structured, and words that we use within Spiders to mean certain things, as well as on our website as well. So it's been a really useful process. The team themselves have found the show and tells really useful to come every week, and just as we were first, I was really keen to just know what's going on. So it's been really useful into communication, to keep that a regular communication tool, and also just having regular meetings and being invited to do user testing with the digital team as well. So it's not like they're doing it by themselves, they're involving the service as well. And so I can't really say about the next section because I haven't seen the end product, but from what I'm seeing from my perspective now, it would be really good to have, I don't have the time to sit and watch 40-minute user testing, so from my perspective, I need a nice analysis of that and as to reasons why we've gone with the content and the design that we have. So that's what I'm looking forward to in the next process.
So what would be your advice to future service managers working with the content team now that you've tried it out?
Be open-minded, be flexible. You know your service, you know what you know that, but also think about it from someone else's perspective who has never worked in your service at all. I've worked in libraries for nearly 15 years now. I'm not going to say I'm institutionalised, but I'm very much involved in that service area, which is very unique. So it's very interesting to hear from someone else's perspective on what your service is and what, the different. I would never have used the word ordering a library book. You put ordering in there. I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe that makes more sense. So, be open-minded and like I say, just listen. And if it doesn't work, then that's fine as well. But just go with it and see what happens. That's my advice, really.
Thanks.
Anything else? No? Okay, cool. I'll let you carry on then.
Yep, so just to finish up, the next steps for us are to iterate based on the user research. We only finished the last of the sessions yesterday, so we've got to get the results of that and start drilling down and look at where we have to change things, where people are getting stuck, things like that. Continue the peer review. We've got to go through all the pages that we have written and go and have someone else check them, make sure they make sense, make sure they do the thing they're meant to do, make sure we're not using words that too many words, too many things that we shouldn't be saying, that we don't need to be saying, I should say. Everything should be clear and concise, and then it will be sending the content for review. We'll send it over to Zoe, and hopefully, we'll be able to publish it quite soon. And I think that's yep.
So that was just the libraries, right? Not all the other.
Yeah, every other service. Hi everybody, I'm Tom Harrison. I'm the delivery manager on this project. So I'm standing in for the developers and our designer Lawrence, who are away doing actual work rather than just talking about it. So yeah, we've been working on the Find and Apply for Job digital service for the last 6 weeks, I think. Continue to make good progress on that. Should hopefully be finished up in the next sprint. In the most recent sprint, we've been working on the search functionality. So there's 2 elements to this. There's searching via free text, which then performs a search on words in the job title and the job description. There's also filtering options available as well. And then with the filtering, once you've filtered down to a specific job category, you can then set up search alerts for that, something else we completed this sprint. Next sprint, we need to get functionality into unsubscribe from search alerts, but one step at a time. After search, we've also been working on categorization, and so what we found is there's loads and loads of different ways of categorizing jobs, and they all pull through from a talent link into the new website as you'd expect. What we've added is this idea of supergroups, which is a way of essentially collating different groups into a larger category. So you might have admin jobs in various parts of the council. People might not think I'm looking for a job as an administrator in the planning department. They might just think I'm looking for a job as an administrator. And so supergroups allow us to collate things in this way. The example I've got at the bottom there is adult social care plus children's social care could be just listed as being a social care job. The next steps are applications. So we've got a couple of ways we can look at doing this. There's the simple way, which is pulling a application form through from TalentLink and then displaying it within our new site, or we can build it in the new site and push information back in. We haven't yet decided which of those two is the best way of doing it. There's kind of trade-offs involved in both, so we'll keep looking at that, and we'll be working on that next sprint. Job summaries is the other kind of key thing. What we found when speaking to users is that although it's a digital service, people still want to be able to download a Word document of the job description they can then start hacking around on whilst working their application. So we need to include that as well. And there'll also be ongoing user testing, just make sure that the things we're building are the right things. Analytics.
Oh, that's me. Hello. Just a quick bit on data, and we've got colleagues from information governance in. Hello, this is timely. So we've had an interesting problem to solve in that we want to collect data about how our users kind of use this new website. So we need to understand things about how people are navigating their way through, so that we can make good decisions about kind of future design. So we can know about whether things are doing what they should do, helping people do tasks. But at the same time, we have a duty, in fact, it's the law. We have to respect people's kind of privacy. And the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, kind of are quite specific and detailed about what that means. So we wanted to have a think about what that trade-off is when we're looking at something like analytics across a big website and where the balance kind of lies. So this is the challenge, and it's there isn't a single right answer. There's lots of right answers in here, and we're trying to figure out, kind of for us, for our team, for the way that we work, where do we sit on this balance of collecting lots of data, so we've got lots of insight, versus collecting no data and having no insight as the two extremes. So the default option for most websites, most of the time, is Google Analytics for lots of reasons. Primarily, it's free. Second, it's incredibly powerful. It's an incredibly powerful analytics platform that can tell you all sorts of things about a user's behaviour, not just on your website, but how they then move across other websites. The trade-off with that is Google are hoovering up all of the data about the internet. That's their business model. So if it's free, you kind of have to ask yourself, well, why is it free? Where's the product here? Who's benefiting from this? And also, if you're not very careful about how it's set up and managed, there's potentially quite a lot of personal information is being captured, stored, and potentially even being sent on to other organisations as well. So you've got to be quite particular in how you manage this thing. So for where we're at with our new website, and just we had a good honest chat about how we use analytics, the kind of time we've got right now, the skills we have in the team today to do something with this data, we feel a better option is to radically minimise the amount of information we collect. So privacy by design. Step one, what's the least amount of information we can collect about our users? And then we can see if we've got enough, and we can build our way up rather than starting with capture everything and then see if we use it. So to do that, we had a little look around to see what other options are out there for analytics platforms. And there's some really interesting companies popping up who are doing kind of privacy-centered analytics for the web, and very much kind of marketing themselves as alternatives to Google. The one that we're going to try first, and it is a trial. We like experimenting in this team, so we're going to give it a go, see how it feels. A little company called Fathom Analytics. This is a analytics service that doesn't collect any personal information about users at all. So we only get aggregate data about how people use our web. So there's huge benefits to this. It immediately means we don't have any issues around kind of GDPR because we're just not capturing personal information at all. Also means we don't have to put one of those annoying cookie pop-ups on the website yet because we're not using cookies. We don't have to track anything. So because we haven't plugged in lots of other services in this new website either, we can completely just get rid of that for now. We might need to introduce one in the future if we find some other reasons for having tracking, but for now, there's nothing going on there. The trade-off, and it will be a trade-off, is the data we'll get will be fairly simple compared to what we're used to with Google Analytics. So we'll have some quite basic dashboards that give us information about, aggregate numbers of people visiting the site, how long they spend, how quickly they kind of bounce off the website, and that can be broken down at page level as well. So we'll get some information about pages. We'll also get some information about where people are being referred in from. So we'll know if they're coming from Google, if they're coming from Facebook. But there'll be a limit to how deep we can drill down into that and to how far we can actually track people through big interactions across lots of things. But as I say, for now, we feel like that's the right balance. We'll start with privacy first. And if we're genuinely struggling to make decisions as a team and to design better services, then we'll have a justification to add more data capture. But until we feel like we're justified in doing that, say this is the thing for now. So the only other small trade-off is this service isn't free because their model's very different. So we'll be paying something in the region of $500 a year. So it's not big money, and that should cover us in terms of the amount of data we need to capture in this first bit of the project. So again, we will circle back round, and I think as we go into having a live service that people are starting to interact with, we'll start sharing some data about how people are using it, and you can help us decide whether we have enough insight or not as we try to answer questions. So who's talking about some other stuff? Mike, okay.
What's next? Hello. Right, as you've heard and seen today and over the last few weeks, there's a lot of very exciting work being building a new website, looking at all sorts of other things, but in the background, especially at the moment, there's a lot of work that's being done on the essential but not very glamorous task of rebranding our existing web estate and things that go around that. It sounds fairly simple, but actually it's quite complex because the web estate can refer to lots of different things. For example, our 5 existing websites, as I hope you know, we're not going to be able to put all of the content onto our new website by vesting day. And we had to make the decision, what do we do with those sites? We need users to see that they are looking at the new Buckinghamshire Council information, but we also don't want them to get confused about where they are. So what we're going to be doing is basically rebranding the existing legacy websites, and the districts are working hard at it, and we're working hard at it here. And everybody's, we had a meeting together, which was really useful yesterday, to try and make sure that everybody's doing roughly the same thing. And we're trying to make it so that users can see there's the new logo. It's very clear that you're looking at the Buckinghamshire Council website, but you can also see it doesn't look exactly like our new website. So you realise that you're looking at legacy content, and there will be a message at the top to say that you're looking at legacy content. So we've been working with our suppliers. They are I'm working with them this week, and we've got a call on Monday with them. Hopefully everything's going to be on track to try and make sure that they can get... That's pretty much going to be headers and footers that we're going to be doing, really. That means rather than trying to change link colours and all that sort of thing. We also have many microsites, some of which are quite sort of standalone sites, and we've had to look at those separately. Some of them have got very minimal council branding on anyway. Others are different, so really we've had to take each site on its own merit and speak to our suppliers and say, this is what we would like you to do. And then we have the FirmStep Forms platform. That's my colleague Carl there working away at it, because that's something that our suppliers, because there's a lot of bespoke code that is used in style sheets for putting on our council branding. Our suppliers aren't able to do that themselves, so we're doing that in-house. And I think it's, as you can see, it's working away, and we've got some green, we've got some blue, we're moving on, we're getting there. And I think it's working very well. And hopefully we'll be able to have a complete web estate which will be obvious to people who they are and which information they're looking at. So, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Cool. Just to add, very little about the design system. So in line with what Mike was just talking about, to make sure that all our services, all our websites behave consistently, we're currently working on the version 2, so the next iteration of the digital design guidelines, which will include some additional elements like form elements and buttons and whatnot, things that again need to look and behave consistently across all these different estates, if you will. So that's all I'll say at this point. Next steps.
Oh, yeah. Last little bit. So these next steps are going to start looking quite similar week to week as we kind of head towards the 1st of April. So we've as we talked about last time, we've had to really kind of sit down and have quite an honest conversation with ourselves and with the organisations about what can we really now get done in time for the 1st of April as an absolute has to be there, and where might we need to make a few compromises. So on the list of things, address search and postcode lookup for those folk who are not sure which old area they need to navigate their way to is still something we think we're going to need. We've got loads of policy statements coming in from all over the organisation at the moment. That can be anything from kind of privacy statements, stuff about accessibility of this new website itself, through to some more detailed stuff that in the planning department or as a new corporate body and how we want to kind of describe things like our constitution. So we just need answers for where that's going to go and how we're going to point people at it on day one. It probably won't be the kind of final way that we'll deal with that, but we just need something that's clear. Contact us and complaints is really quite tricky. Just again, we have lots of routing in our current system. So depending on who you want to make a comment or a complaint about, it'll ask you some information to help figure out, well, what department is it about? Within a department, what issue is it about? So it can then get off to the right team. Each organisation has its own version of that. So building one mega version of that across the top of everything isn't viable for day one. So we're trying to figure out, okay, well, again, what's the quickest way of getting somebody who has, for example, a complaint about planning in Wickham to be able to go straight to that bit of the website so they know that they're getting their message through to the right person. So that's the challenge. No idea how we're going to solve it, but we will have something ready for...
Sorry, don't they just go to the complaint landing page and make a complaint about planning at Wickham?
Indeed. So that's the job. So in things like that, we would want to point them probably to the old Wickham site. But if it's about the new...
No, it's because it's a complaint. So you're asked, it's a complaint.
Yes.
So it would go to Kate's team.
Yes.
Who would then triage it
Yeah.
themselves.
So the challenge, I think, is in the software that we're using to capture complaints and how we capture that on the new website and feed it into the software, or is it being captured on one of the 5 existing sites? It's where the right point in the process is for somebody to enter this.
The reason I'm asking is because the expectation
Yeah.
from FOI
Yes.
would be similar to
Yep.
complaints or data protection, is that you just go to the data protection page,
Mhm.
fill in a web form, which we're not sure if we're using the API enabled
Yes,
or
yes.
the respond
Yep.
web form. Either of those web forms feeds into the respond system, case system,
Yes.
which is centrally managed by the team.
Yep.
So it doesn't go to any other websites.
That's the intent. I think for complaints, I think that's more straightforward. I think for general contact us.
Sorry, but because
Let's
you say
so
complaints
I
as
did.
well, sorry.
My bad. Yeah. So the complaints bit is a bit more specific, but for general contact us
That I get.
about what
Yeah.
what circumstance
Now I
to which
understand.
organisation
Just
is.
wanted to make sure that
No,
we
so
were
we've
on
got,
the same.
and this is part of the complexity. So we've got complaints, FOI, subject access requests, comments, compliments,
and they're all central.
all centralised,
And then you have contact
all
us,
heading
which
off in
I get.
different directions,
Well,
and all will
all
need
going to respond.
eventually. Yes,
No.
Yeah.
For a vesting day,
that's
complaints,
Yep.
compliments, all of that,
is being handled in the back
Respond.
office system. Yes,
not the website.
not the website, but how we capture that data, where the right point is to capture that data and get it to
On
respond.
the landing page.
But is it always the new? We can sit down
It's
and go through
always
the
the
detail.
new.
We can sketch out the detail of
Sorry,
this.
and so I think we need to do that kind of quickly because it's always
We do. So we've had two versions of that conversation. So there's this is why we need to sit down and figure it out. We can pick this up immediately after this.
Yes, immediate.
Yes. So things like that, as an example, where we're just not clear on what the intent is, what the answer is, and what the best option for day one is going to be. Newsletter sign up. So we have a newsletter capture form. Similarly, we just need to figure out the right way to point somebody to the right form, capture the right information in the right way, and get that into that system. And we've got some lovely new kind of standardised content around how we work with parish and town councils, and how we devolve decision making to organisations like that, what that looks like, and also planning. So some of our planning policy is starting to align, which is great. So it means we can have a single version of some of our planning content. But again, do we have time to design that perfectly on the new website now, or is that something that, for example, might need to be replicated across 5 websites? Is a live question at the moment that we just need to make some quick decisions on. So yeah, next show and tell, 5th of March, couple of weeks' time. Hopefully we'll have some libraries content up. We'll have another demo of the job site because we'll have had a bunch of stuff here. Developers aren't here because they're busy getting on with that today. And we'll start to have some more answers to some of these things where we're being a bit vague. Any other questions?
What's the timeline for the next release?
Next release.
Because this was put up as an early alpha,
Oh,
and
yeah.
originally there was going to be an alpha kind of end of Feb sometime. Is that still the plan? Or?
Yeah, it's not. So it's constantly iterating is the answer to that. So the thing we put out at the end of January, what we have today is already very different to that. So we're releasing software, every week or every 2 weeks to the website. So there are changes happening. Content's being published to a kind of staging site. When we're happy with it, we'll move it across into the new site. So it's a kind of more of a steady flow rather than
I didn't realise that the
big switch.
live site was being updated. I thought you might be doing it in staging and then.
Yes, we are, but it's happening kind of all the time. So it's like a constant flow of work. So we'll probably make a little bit more of a fanfare about it a bit closer to the 1st of April, just so that as the communications start ramping up, we'll start talking about it a bit more. But yeah, and that really that's the plan as we continue then, and that's the challenge for the new organisation really, is how do we keep iterating this thing kind of forever, a bit, so that we don't get to a point where we have to, in 3 or 4 years' time, spin up another big project team to kind of do another fundamental rebuild of a thing. And that's a question for post-April for sure. Cool. Alrighty. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Very good.